Everyone talks about nightmares, but no one expects to wake up inside one. At 5:34 in the morning, I was standing barefoot in my living room, watching red and blue lights flash across my walls. Not sirens, not chaos, just the quiet hum of a big, black SWAT truck outside my house. Calm, precise, like hunters who had already chosen their prey. And the prey was me. My daughter Sarah was still asleep down the hall. 10 years old, dreaming her little girl dreams, while a loudspeaker split the silence. "David Morrison, this is the police. We have the house surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Come out now." I froze. My brain spun through every possibility. Taxes? No. I'm an accountant. A warrant? I've never even had a speeding ticket. What could justify rifles at dawn outside a quiet man's house? Then the memory hit me. The trencher. A rented machine, sitting in my backyard. I'd been digging yesterday, laying a sprinkler line. Legal, approved, by the book. But I knew exactly whose eyes had been burning into me the entire time. Karen Brown, president of our HOA. She hated my lawn ornaments, hated my independence, hated me. And now, she had called in the cavalry. The voice outside grew sharper. "David Morrison, come out now. Do not make us come in." I threw on jeans and a gray t-shirt. No shoes, no belt, nothing that could look like a weapon. My hands trembled, but I held them high as I walked to the door. The dawn air was cold against my bare feet. I twisted the lock, opened the door, and stepped onto the porch. Rifles locked on me instantly. Red laser dots danced on my chest. Every step I took felt like it could be my last. "Walk towards me slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." I obeyed. Plastic cuffs bit into my wrists as 2 officers closed in. Professional, firm, but not cruel. Still, my daughter was upstairs, and they thought she was a hostage. "What is this about?" I asked, voice steady. The officer glanced at me, searching my face for lies. "We had a call. Report of a man with a gun digging trenches. Caller said you were unstable, said you might shoot." Unstable, gun, shoot, words that could end with a bullet in my chest. And in that moment, the pieces clicked into place. Karen Brown had weaponized the police. "I don't own a gun," I said quietly. "The only machine on my property is a trencher, sprinkler line, backyard." He studied me for a long beat, then into his radio. "Clear the house." I stood outside, heart hammering, as officers stormed inside my home. The sounds of boots, voices, doors swinging open. And then, "Clear, upstairs clear, no weapons, just a little girl asleep in her bed." My Sarah. The lead officer's eyes softened slightly. He nodded and the cuffs came off, but his words stayed with me forever. The caller mentioned she was a hostage. That was Karen's lie. That was the poison she had dripped into the phone, cold and deliberate. That I was dangerous, that my daughter was in peril, and that officers should shoot if I resisted. Later, I'd hear it for myself on the 911 tape, her exact words. But even without hearing it, I felt it. She wanted me dead. The trucks pulled away, heavy tires leaving scars in my lawn. Across the street, blinds snapped shut. A porch light flickered off. The neighborhood had seen, and no one spoke. The sergeant lingered. He tapped his body cam, bookmarking the moment, and slipped me a card with a case number scrawled in Sharpie. "File a records request," he muttered. "Audio and CAD log. If it's what I think, you'll want it in your pocket." Then they were gone. And I was left on my porch, staring at a rising sun that painted the sky in pinks and oranges. A morning too beautiful for the hollow rage curdling in my chest. I should have felt relief. My daughter was safe, unharmed, still asleep. But I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. Because Karen Brown had shown me something I could never unsee. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor or a petty tyrant obsessed with lawn decorations. She was something worse. She had declared war, and she had used the police as her weapon. I walked back inside. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From rage. a cold, focused rage that accountants aren't supposed to know. I looked at the clock. 6:15 a.m., and I made a decision. I picked up the phone. My brother answered on the first ring. "Luke," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I need you." And just like that, the war began. When Luke pulled into my driveway at 7:45 a.m., the neighborhood was still pretending to be normal. Joggers passed with headphones in. Someone's sprinkler hissed in the distance. But when my brother stepped out of his sedan, I knew normal was gone. Luke didn't wear anger on his face. He never did. He carried it somewhere deeper, hidden under a layer of calm that always made me feel smaller, younger, even though I was the older brother. His dark gray car was spotless, stocked with emergency supplies because that's who Luke was, prepared for everything. Today, that preparedness looked like salvation. He hugged me quickly, firmly. "You okay?" His eyes flicked to Sarah's window. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," I said. Slept through the whole thing. I told her the sirens were for a false alarm down the street. He gave a small nod. Approval. Protect the innocent. That was his code. Inside, the kitchen smelled of coffee I had brewed just to stay busy. We sat at the table, mugs between us. Luke didn't touch sugar or cream. He took the bitterness as it came, just like he did with life. "Start from the beginning," he said. "Don't leave anything out." So I told him everything. From the moment Karen glared at me over her porch rail while I dug the trench, to the rifles aimed at my chest, to the words the officer spoke: unstable, hostage, shoot if they resist. I showed him my notebook with timestamps, every detail. I'd logged because numbers were the only shield I had. Luke never interrupted. He only nodded, his eyes calm, but I knew him. Behind that calm, gears were turning. He wasn't just listening, he was building a case. When I finally finished, silence hung between us. Luke stared out the window at Karen's house. Her lawn looked perfect. Her oversized wreath glared from her front door like a badge of power. She had no idea her empire had just declared war on the wrong family. "Okay," he said finally. She crossed a line. "This isn't about decorations anymore. She created a situation where you or an officer could have been killed, and she dragged Sarah into it." His jaw tightened. "That's unforgivable." I nodded. The thought of my daughter's name on Karen's lips during that 911 call made me sick. "We're not going to punch back," Luke said, eyes locked on mine. "That's what she wants. She wants you to look unstable, violent. Instead, we build. We document. Evidence beats muscle, always." He pulled a black backpack onto the table and unzipped it. I braced myself, half expecting tools of violence, but inside, a digital camera, a field notebook, an audio recorder, plastic evidence bags, a GPS unit, an army of procedure. "First," he said, sliding the notebook toward me, "you keep logging. Every sighting, every incident, every time her dog steps on your grass. Date, time, detail. Boring is good. Be an accountant. That's your weapon." "I can do that," I said. It was the one battlefield I understood. "Second." He pulled out a tiny camera. "Birdhouse cam, motion activated, goes in the oak tree. It'll cover your front yard and gate. Nobody will suspect it. Silent witness." We mounted it together. To the world, it was decor. To us, it was an eye that never blinked. "Third," Luke continued back at the table, "we need baseline, data, utilities. Take photos of your water meter and electric meter every day at the same time. If she tampers with anything, we'll see the spikes." I grabbed my phone, snapped pictures of both meters, and saved them to a folder labeled brown. "Numbers don't lie. Fourth and most important," Luke said, his voice steady. "We stay clean. No shortcuts. Sprinkler project. Was it approved?" "Yes, I submitted the plan 2 months ago. HOA stamped it." "Good. We operate in the light. She operates in the dark. That's our advantage." He dialed a number on his phone. "Hello, this is 811. I need utility markings for a residential address." By noon, the city would send a crew to paint the earth in colored lines. Official, legal, undeniable. Proof that we were by the book. I stared at him, half in awe, half in fear. Luke had turned my suburban street into a field operation. "This is your mission now," he said. "Collect data, follow the rules, be ready." When he left, the house felt less fragile. My rage had a channel. It became fuel. I opened a spreadsheet and began building my fortress of evidence. But that night, just before midnight, the fortress shook. At 11:42, I heard it, a faint squeak. Not just any squeak, my side gate. The one Sarah and I had painted green years ago. That hinge had always whined at night. I had meant to fix it. Now, I was glad I hadn't. I texted Luke one word, "Side gate." His reply came instantly. "Camera is live. Stay put. Do not engage. You're a witness." I pulled up the birdhouse feed. Grainy night vision flickered to life. A man in dark clothes, hoodie pulled tight, eyes darting. In his hands, bolt cutters. My heartbeat thundered. He snapped the Y. Latch slipped inside. Gone from view. I switched cameras, one inside, pointing at the back door. A shadow loomed against the glass. He jiggled the handle. Locked. He pressed his face close, trying to peer inside. 20 feet away, I held my breath. Then he pulled something from his waistband. Metal caught the faint light. A gun. He scanned my yard with a flashlight. The beam swept over Sarah's swing set. My stomach twisted. Then, beep. My motion sensor chimed. A red light blinked outside. He froze, shoved the gun back into his pants, then bolted. Stumbling, scrambling, gone. It had lasted less than 3 minutes, but the cold certainty it left behind would last forever. Not about sprinklers anymore, not about lawns. This was intimidation. This was war. By dawn, sleep was impossible. My body still hummed with the image of that gun glinting in the dark, a shadow 20 feet from my daughter's window. Rage had cooled into something sharper, resolve. At first light, Luke was already in my driveway. His trunk open, 2 clean shovels propped against it. He didn't waste words. "We dig." But first, he insisted we stay by the book. Utility crews arrived with their spray cans and flags, painting my lawn in bright streaks of red, yellow, blue, and orange. Each line a warning: gas, water, electric, communications. To the neighbors, it looked official, because it was. Karen could stare all she wanted from her curtains. To her, we weren't rebels. We were law-abiding homeowners following procedure. Luke's foresight had wrapped our investigation in legitimacy. We stood over a dark, soggy patch of soil that stretched like a scar across the grass. The ground there was wetter than it should have been, parallel to the city's waterline, but drifting sideways, toward Karen's property. Luke crouched low, running a hand through the damp earth. "This isn't runoff, it's a leak or a drain." He straightened, meeting my eyes. "It's theft." The word sank in, heavier than I expected. Theft. She wasn't just weaponizing lies and cops. She was stealing from me every single day. Luke E. handed me a shovel. "Let's find the proof." The digging was hard but steady, each shovel of wet soil lifting us closer to an answer. My hands blistered, my shirt clung with sweat. But beneath the exhaustion was something almost exhilarating: purpose. Each scoop was a defiance, a step toward reclaiming what she had tried to take from me. We cut neat squares of sod, laying them aside carefully. We weren't vandals. We were investigators. My daughter would see that when she woke up and saw the yard. 2 feet down, Luke's shovel struck something. A dull thunk. Not stone, not root. "Hold up," he said. We dropped to our knees, brushing away the mud with our hands. And then it appeared, a blue plastic pipe, not marked on the city map. Not part of the legal web the crews had flagged. A secret line. It branched off from my main water feed through a new T-shaped fitting, glue still clean and bright. One side led to my house, the other cut sideways, vanishing straight toward Karen. Brown's prize rose bushes. "This is it," Luke whispered. His calm cracked just enough to let through a current of fury. An illegal tap. I stared at it, my chest heaving. The proof was right there in the mud. Karen hadn't just lied about me. She hadn't just called SWAT to my door. She had crawled beneath my lawn like a parasite and stolen from me day after day, month after month. I pulled out my phone. My hands were still filthy, but I didn't care. I took photos from every angle, close-ups, wide shots, city flags in the background. I even set a ruler down for scale. Evidence, always evidence. This isn't suspicion anymore, I muttered. It's a crime scene. Luke stood, his shovel planted like a staff. We don't touch it. We don't fix it. We don't even close it. We call the experts. Let them catch her red-handed. He made a call. Not the police, not yet. He called the city water department. By 10:15 a.m., a white utility truck rolled up. 2 men climbed out, heavy boots, grim faces. Their name tags read Manny and Chris, the kind of guys who had seen every shady trick in the book. I led them to the trench. Manny crouched, letting out a low whistle. Well, I'll be, right off the meter feed. Bold. He shook his head. This isn't just a code violation. This is felony theft of utilities, Luke explained, calm and methodical. High meter readings on my side. Suspiciously low usage on Karen's. He left out the gunman, left out the SWAT raid. For now, we kept it. Simple. Theft. Think she's been watering her whole yard off your line? Chris asked. I nodded. Her lawn's emerald green in drought while everyone else's dies. Manny stood, his eyes narrowing at Karen's house. We can prove it. He returned to the truck and came back with a small sealed container. Inside, a bright, almost glowing green liquid. Tracer dye, he said. Non-toxic. Invisible in your water, but if her line is tapped, it'll show up neon green in hers. Simple. Undeniable. Hope surged in my chest, twisted with something darker. Anticipation. Manny had me sign a form. Then, with surgical care, he poured the dye into my line just before the illegal tap. We opened my hose bib. Clear water flowed. Good, he said. Now for the main event. With a patrol officer present, called in to witness, Manny walked across the street to Karen's front porch. Curtains twitched up and down the block. Neighbors craned necks, phones ready. Word was spreading fast. Something was happening. Karen opened the door in a pristine white tennis outfit. She smiled, brittle and forced. Manny asked her politely to run her hose for 10 seconds. She complied, too confident to imagine what was about to happen. Water gushed onto her spotless driveway, bright, shocking neon green. For a moment, silence. Then murmurs. A child's voice piped up, high and gleeful. Slime water. Neighbors gasped, whispered. Cameras clicked. Green water spread like spilled paint across the concrete, and Karen's mask cracked, just for a second. Her eyes went wide, raw panic flashing through before her face hardened again. She snapped something at Manny, pointed at my house, gestured wildly, but her voice was drowned out by the sight, the evidence glowing at her feet. Manny didn't argue. He just filmed, clipboard steady in his hand, as the neighborhood watched the queen of their HOA drown in fluorescent proof of her own theft. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I only stood still, my heart steady for the first time in weeks. Because Karen Brown had just been caught, and she knew it. But Luke's voice was in my ear, quiet, warning. Don't get comfortable. A cornered animal fights the hardest. And he was right, because before the day was over, Karen would prove just how dangerous desperation could become. The green water should have been the end of it. Proof splattered across Karen's pristine driveway, captured on cameras and witnessed by half the block. The city had filed its report. The officer had logged the incident. Logic said we had won. But logic had nothing to do with Karen Brown. Luke's warning echoed in my mind. A cornered animal fights the hardest. And that afternoon, I learned just how right he was. When I pulled up at Sarah's school, relief brushed over me for the first time in days. Kids poured out of the building, laughing, backpacks bouncing, a normal scene. Sarah spotted me, waved, and ran toward the car, her smile wide. For a heartbeat, she was just a little girl again. Then I saw her, Karen Brown, standing by the bike racks, dressed not in her tennis whites, but in a sharp gray pantsuit. Her face was tight, eyes locked on me, fury barely contained. She wasn't there for a child. She was there for me. I moved towards Sarah, stepping in front of her instinctively. "Daddy, we made volcanoes in science class," she said, wrapping her arms around my leg. I forced a smile. "That sounds amazing, sweetie." But Karen was already moving, her heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice cold, cutting. "Karen," I replied, my tone flat. "This isn't the time, or the place." "You need to stop," she hissed, eyes burning. "You think you've won something? You think you can humiliate me?" She stepped closer. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Sarah pressed closer against me. I could feel her trembling. That was the line, the one I could never let her cross. "We're leaving," I said firmly, taking Sarah's hand. "Come on, sweetie, let's get some ice cream." I turned my back. A mistake. Because Karen lunged, she didn't come for me. She grabbed Sarah. My daughter's small wrist was suddenly locked in her grip, Karen's fingers digging hard into her skin. Sarah let out a cry of pain, high and terrified. "Tell your dad to stop," Karen snarled, her face inches from my child's. "Tell him to leave me alone." Time slowed. I saw my daughter's wide, terrified eyes. I saw Karen's manic fury. Every instinct in me screamed to shove her away, to make her feel an ounce of the fear she was pouring into Sarah's little body. My hand twitched, but then Luke's voice echoed in my head. "Evidence beats muscle. Violence is her language, not ours." I steadied my breath. My voice came out low, quiet, deadly quiet. "Let go of my daughter." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Karen's eyes flickered, uncertain. And then another voice cut through. "Ma'am, you need to let go of the child right now." Mr. Henderson, a young teacher working crosswalk duty, was suddenly there. Strong hand on Karen's shoulder. His tone calm but steel beneath it. Parents froze, phones lifted. Cameras caught everything. Karen's eyes darted, realizing. Her mask slammed back on. She shoved Sarah's arm away like it was something filthy. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I was just talking to her." And then she stormed off, pushing through the crowd, climbing into her expensive white SUV. Tires screeched as she sped away. I dropped to my knees, pulling Sarah close. "Are you okay? Let me see." Her eyes brimmed with silent tears. On her wrist, red marks stood out, angry and raw. 5 distinct, finger-shaped welts. Mr. Henderson crouched beside us. "I saw everything," he said firmly. "The principal will want a report." He was right. Documentation, evidence. Always evidence. We went straight to the nurse's office. Mrs. Gable, kind and steady, clucked softly as she examined Sarah's wrist. She took photos, measured the marks, noted the time. 3:22 p.m. Sarah winced but stayed brave. The nurse gave her an ice pack and a sticker, but the weight of the moment was heavier than any child should bear. I called Luke on the drive home. My voice shook. She grabbed Sarah, at school, in front of everyone. His reply was tight, controlled. "Is Sarah okay?" "She's scared, but she's tough." The nurse documented the marks. "Good," Luke said. "Now go to your doctor. Get a second report. And call the principal. Make sure the school preserves that CCTV footage. This isn't just harassment anymore. This is assault on a minor." That word, assault, burned in my chest. It felt different than theft. Different than false reports. This was physical. This was my daughter. At the doctor's office, Dr. Evans examined Sarah with gentle hands. His face hardened when he saw the forming bruises. "This was deliberate," he said, his voice low, consistent with an adult hand gripping too tightly. He took more photos. He wrote his report, time-stamped, clinical, undeniable. By evening, the bruises darkened into a clear, ugly handprint across Sarah's wrist, proof carved into her skin. 2 patrol officers came the next afternoon to take statements. Their body cams recorded Sarah's fading bruise. They recorded Karen storming over mid-interview, shouting that we were liars. The officers stayed calm. The cameras didn't lie. That night, Sarah fell asleep quickly, exhaustion and fear weighing her down. I stood in her doorway, watching her small chest rise and fall. My promise hardened into steel. This was no longer about my lawn. Not about money. Not even about Karen's lies. She had crossed into something that changed everything. She had hurt my child, and I swore, in that quiet, dimly lit room, I would make it right. Not with fists, not with rage, but with the one weapon Karen could. Never control. Truth, sharpened by evidence. The next 3 days blurred into one long stretch of coffee, notebooks, and sleepless determination. My dining room stopped being a family space. It became a war room. The polished table was buried under photos, USB drives, time-stamped logs, stacks of printed reports. From a distance, it might have looked like we were preparing for a corporate merger. In truth, we were preparing to dismantle a tyrant. Sarah colored quietly at the corner of the table, crayons scratching against paper, while her bruises faded from angry red to deep purple. Every time I caught sight of her wrist, that handprint burned into me like fire. It wasn't just evidence, it was a promise. I would not let her carry that mark in vain. Luke was methodical, as always. We need to build this like a case file, he said. Not just suspicions, facts layered tight, everything admissible. So we started with the cornerstone, the 911 call. I had filed the records request the morning after the raid. 2 days later, the file arrived in my email. Luke and I sat shoulder to shoulder at the laptop, the speakers quiet at first, then filling the room with Karen's voice. It was worse than I imagined. Calm, convincing. She didn't sound unhinged. She sounded like a perfect neighbor reporting a danger. Yes, my neighbor, David Morrison. He's been very erratic, digging trenches in the dark. He has a rifle. I think he's holding his daughter hostage. Then came the line, the one that chilled the blood in my veins. Be careful. He's ex-military. I think unstable. You should probably shoot if they resist. Luke froze the audio, replayed it twice. His face never moved, but his knuckles whitened around the mouse. She was trying to get you killed, David, he said, finally. Make no mistake about it. I copied the file 3 times, USB, cloud, external drive. A lie that dangerous had to be preserved in triplicate. Next came the water theft. I pulled out the photos of the illegal tap we'd uncovered in the mud, the junction feeding Karen's property like a parasite. Luke laid them side by side with the official city water department report, stamped and signed by Manny himself. Then we added the dye test photos, fluorescent green water gushing from her hose, splattering across her spotless driveway like a signature she could never scrub away. That's airtight, Luke said. Visual proof backed by city officials. No HOA spin can erase this. Then he moved to the trespasser. From his backpack, he pulled the evidence bag with the dropped leather glove, sealed tight. Beside it, the plaster cast of the boot print we had lifted from the mud. We need to connect this, he muttered. He spent an hour on his laptop, combing the internet until he found it. The Brown & Son plumbing website. Karen's brother-in-law, Frank, stood proudly on the Our Team page, smiling beside a white van. And on his feet, a pair of heavy-duty work boots, their tread distinctive, unmistakable. Luke zoomed in, then set the photo beside the cast. The patterns matched perfectly. It's circumstantial, he admitted, but strong, very strong. Still, Luke wasn't done. He walked across the street, knocked on neighbor Henderson's door, not the teacher, another Henderson, the quiet one with the doorbell camera. An hour later, he returned with a video clip. It wasn't crystal clear, but it didn't need to be. The timestamp matched my log down to the minute. It showed a hooded figure approaching my driveway, bolt cutters glinting. 3 minutes later, the same figure ran back out, stumbling in panic. The footage didn't show his face, but it corroborated every detail of my account. Layer by layer, Luke said, almost to himself. The cage builds. Finally, we assembled the evidence that cut deepest, the assault on Sarah. We laid out the school nurse's report, photos of the red marks she had measured, then Dr. Evans's medical report, documenting the bruises as consistent with forceful adult grip. The school principal's email confirming the CCTV footage would be preserved. Mr. Henderson's signed statement, affirming what he saw when he pulled Karen off my daughter. Each piece of paper felt heavier than it should, like soldiers lining up, waiting for battle. When it was all laid out, Luke opened his laptop and began building the presentation. Not flashy, no tricks, just facts. Slide 1, the 911 call with transcript and embedded audio. Slide 2, photos of the SWAT raid aftermath, tire tracks carved into my lawn. Slide 3, the illegal water tap, the city's dye test, the usage graphs. Slide 4, trespass footage, the glove, the boot cast beside Frank's boots. Slide 5, Sarah's wrist, the handprint that told the story better than words ever could. We sat in silence as the slides clicked past. The evidence spoke louder than either of us. "This isn't just defense anymore," Luke said at last, closing the laptop. "This is offense. Tonight at the HOA meeting, we drop it all." My stomach tightened. I imagined the rows of folding chairs, the stale coffee smell, Karen at the front of the room with her plastic smile. For years, neighbors had bowed their heads under her rule. Tonight, we would show them the truth. I looked at Sarah, asleep on the couch with her ice pack slipping onto the rug, her tiny wrist bandaged. I kissed her forehead gently. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It wasn't about sprinklers, or fines or lawns. It was about justice. And by the end of tonight, the walls Karen Brown had built around her empire would start to crack. The HOA clubhouse always smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee. Normally, these meetings were about budgets, paint colors, lawn heights. But that night, the room buzzed with something heavier. 30 neighbors filled the folding chairs, murmuring quietly. Some looked anxious. Some looked curious. All of them were tired of Karen Brown. She sat at the front table, flanked by 2 board members who looked more like prisoners than allies. Her smile was wide, rehearsed, brittle as glass. When her eyes fell on me, it faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Then it snapped back, plastic perfect. Luke and I arrived early. He carried the small projector in his backpack, calm and deliberate. We set it up quietly in the back. Karen noticed. Her eyes flicked to the equipment, confusion flashing across her face. Then she dismissed it with a shake of her head. In her mind, she was untouchable. The meeting began like any other. Budgets, landscaping, committee reports. The rhythm of bureaucracy. Then Karen cleared her throat, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "It has come to the board's attention," she began, "that certain residents have been engaging in unapproved and frankly dangerous activities, unauthorized. Excavation, harassment of board members, creating a hostile environment for our community." Her gaze found mine. Her voice hardened. "Therefore, the board proposes a fine of $5,000 against Mr. David Morrison." Gasps rippled through the room. $5,000. My neighbors shifted uncomfortably. They knew it was absurd, but Karen's stare dared them to disagree. "Is there any discussion?" she asked, her smile triumphant. I raised my hand slowly. "Yes, I have a presentation." Her jaw tightened. For a moment she hesitated, but the bylaws were clear. Homeowners had the right to speak. The other board members, eager to distance themselves, nodded. "Fine," Karen snapped, "but make it quick." I walked to the back, took the remote from Luke, and faced the room. My heart thudded, but my voice was calm. Accountants are trained to present numbers without emotion. Tonight, I would present truth the same way. "Thank you," I began. "I'd like to start with an audio recording." The wall behind Karen flickered white, then filled with her own voice. Calm, smooth. "Yes, my neighbor, David Morrison. He's been very erratic, digging trenches in the dark. He has a rifle. I think he's holding his daughter hostage. Be careful. You should probably shoot if they resist." The room froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence grow until every eye turned to her. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came. "This," I said finally, "was the 911 call that brought a SWAT team to my home at dawn. The police classified it as a false report. A felony. Karen shot to her feet. This is slander. These recordings are doctored. I ignored her. Click to the next slide. A photo of officers outside my house, rifles raised, tire tracks carved. Into my lawn. This, I continued, was the result of that lie. I clicked again. The muddy trench, the illegal tap, the graph I had built, my water usage spiking, hers flatlining. My line was tapped, I said. Feeding into Mrs. Brown's property, verified by the city water department. Whispers erupted. Neighbors leaned forward, shaking their heads in disgust. Karen's voice rose, shrill. He's making this up. None of this is real. I clicked. Again. The doorbell footage. A hooded man cutting my gate with bolt cutters, then fleeing minutes later. The plaster cast of the boot print beside a photo of her brother-in-law's work boots. The tread matched perfectly. This, I said quietly, was the night after the SWAT raid. Trespassing. Armed. Karen's mask cracked. Her voice shook. With fury. This is a conspiracy. All of you are against me. No one looked at her. They were watching the screen, and then, the final slide, a photo of Sarah's wrist. The handprint. Purple and raw. I swallowed hard. My voice wavered, but I forced it steady. And this is what happened when Mrs. Brown confronted my 10-year-old daughter at school. She grabbed her, threatened her, left this bruise. The room exploded. Shouts, gasps. Parents leapt to their feet. Phones rose, recording. The two board members recoiled from Karen like she was contagious. Lies! She screamed. He's twisting everything. You're all blind. But her words fell flat against the photos, the audio, the facts. Luke stepped forward, his voice calm, cutting through the chaos. Everything you've seen tonight has been documented. Police reports, city records, medical files, witness statements, each piece preserved with a clear chain of custody. This isn't slander. This is evidence, and it is admissible in court. The phrase chain of custody landed like a hammer. The neighbors weren't just angry now. They were certain. Karen looked around the room, desperate. But where she once saw obedience, she now saw contempt. No allies, no nodding heads, just faces turned cold. Her empire had crumbled in less than 20 minutes. I call for an emergency vote, Maria, one of the board members said suddenly, her voice trembling but strong. To remove Karen Brown from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. I second, said the other. Hands shot up across the room. Every single person. Unanimous. Karen staggered, stunned, her smile gone, her power stripped. She sputtered, but no one listened. Maria banged the table with a trembling hand. The motion passes. This meeting is adjourned. The room erupted again, but this time with relief. Neighbors crowded me, shaking my hand, patting my shoulder. Thank you. She's been a tyrant for years. You did what we were all too afraid to do. I glanced at Luke. He gave the smallest nod. Not triumph. Not gloating. Just acknowledgement. One battle was won. But the war wasn't over, because Karen Brown wasn't finished. And we knew cornered animals fight until the very last breath. The morning after the vote, the neighborhood felt different. Lighter somehow. For years, Karen's shadow had stretched over every lawn, every fence, every small decision. And now, it was gone, cut down in one night of truth. But Luke wasn't celebrating. The HOA recall is community justice, he said as we sipped coffee at my kitchen table. Now we go for legal justice. She doesn't just get to walk away from this. So we carried the evidence, the mountain we had built piece by piece, straight to the police precinct. We didn't go to the front desk. Luke had called ahead. We had an appointment with the detective assigned to my trespass case. His office was small, cluttered with case files. He looked like a man who had seen too much and believed half of nothing. But when Luke and I spread the documents across his desk, his skepticism began to fade. We played the 911 recording first. Karen's voice, calm and deliberate, requesting my execution. The detective listened with headphones, his pen hovering. When he pulled them off, his eyebrows were raised. She really said that, he muttered. Shoot if they resist. That's not just a lie, that's intent. Next came the water theft. Photos of the illegal tap, the dye test staining Karen's, driveway green, the official city report signed by Manny. The detective flipped through each page slowly, nodding. Felony theft of utilities, he said. I've seen a dozen cases like this, but never one this blatant. Luke slid over the plaster cast of the boot print, then the photo of Frank Brown's work boots from the plumbing company website. Side by side, the tread patterns matched. Like puzzle pieces. The detective studied it a long moment before scribbling a note. Circumstantial, yes, but compelling, especially when combined with the glove, the doorbell footage, and the timing logs. Finally, we laid down the photos of Sarah's wrist, the nurse's report, the doctor's report, the school principal's email preserving CCTV, Mr. Henderson's signed statement. The detective's pen stopped moving. He stared at the bruises for a long beat, then set his pen down altogether. Assault on a minor, he said quietly. That changes things. When we finished, the desk was buried in evidence. It looked less like a neighborly spat and more like a criminal enterprise. The detective leaned back, rubbing his jaw. You've done most of my job for me, he admitted. I'll consolidate all of this, the false report, the water theft, the trespassing, the assault, into one case file. Then I'll hand it to the district attorney. He looked at me, his expression sober. Given the strength of this, I expect multiple charges, felony level. It was validation. Cold, hard, professional validation. A week later, the call came. The district attorney's office had filed charges. Karen Brown, filing a false police report, theft of utilities, conspiracy and assault. Frank Brown, trespassing, vandalism, conspiracy. They were arrested quietly, no flashing lights, no dawn. Raids. Just two people led away in handcuffs, their reign built on fear collapsing into paperwork and criminal records. The news rippled through the neighborhood like a storm. People didn't cheer. They didn't throw parties. They simply sighed in relief. The air itself seemed lighter. Doors that had stayed shut for years opened. Neighbors waved, talked, lingered. It was like we were rediscovering community in the absence of tyranny. But for me, relief was a fragile thing. I still checked locks twice before bed. I still caught myself glancing at Sarah's wrist, even as the bruise faded. Trust takes longer to heal than skin. Luke reminded me of that in his quiet way. Justice isn't a movie, he said as we filed the last of the evidence into a binder. It's paperwork, it's procedure, it's slow. But when it lands, it's heavy. And it sticks. He was right. Karen and Frank didn't go to prison for life. They took a plea deal. Fines, community service, permanent records. Some might have called it too light. But for me, it was enough. Enough that they couldn't hide behind titles or false smiles. Enough that they would carry the weight of their choices every time a background check pulled their names. And more than enough for Sarah. Because the day we told her Karen wouldn't be bothering us anymore, her shoulders eased. She didn't say much, just went back to coloring at the table. But the crayon strokes came faster, lighter. The street began to heal. Slowly, then all at once. Joey from 2 doors down started a garden club. Families dug up the old shrubs Karen had insisted on and replaced them with vegetables and flowers. Kids ran laughing through the common area, chasing butterflies where once there had only been silence. I finished the sprinkler system. New grass covered the scar of the trench, soft and green. The birdhouse camera still sat in the oak, but I checked it less and less. Karen sold her house. A family moved in, 2 kids, a golden retriever, a basketball hoop. The kind of neighbors who waved when they saw you. Life tilted back toward normal, but it wasn't the same normal. It was better. Stronger, because now we knew the truth. Power built on lies can crumble. And sometimes the smallest act, planting evidence like seeds in a spreadsheet, can bring down a tyrant. One evening, I stood at the curb watching Sarah ride her bike, her laugh carrying down the street. Luke stepped up beside me, quiet as always. You did good, he said. I shook my head. We did good. And for the first time since that morning of flashing lights and rifles, I believed it. Normal. It's a word you don't truly appreciate until it's gone. For weeks, our house had been the eye of a storm. Sirens, trespassers, court filings, neighbors whispering in the dark. But slowly, almost tenderly, normal began to creep. Back in. It started with the sound of birds at dawn. Not the heavy growl of engines idling outside, not the metallic click of rifles being chambered. Just birds. Simple, everyday bird song. Then it was Sarah riding her bike down the street without looking over her shoulder. And then, one Saturday, it was the feel of a shovel in my hands, not as a weapon against lies, but as a tool for my yard again. I was checking sprinkler heads when Sarah padded out with her tiny trowel in hand. Dirt already streaked her cheeks. "What are you doing, Daddy?" she asked. "Making sure it all works," I said. She pointed toward the spot where Luke and I had dug, the ground we'd once ripped open to expose Karen's theft. "Can we plant something there? Something pretty?" Her request hit me harder than I expected. That patch of earth had been a battlefield. Now my daughter wanted to turn it into a garden. "What color?" I asked. She thought for a moment, then grinned. "Bright, like sunshine." So we drove to the nursery and came home with trays of yellow marigolds. Kneeling side by side, we pressed them into the soil, patting the dirt around each one. Her small hands moved with care, steady and... Sure, the flowers glowed against the dark mulch, bright defiances against all the shadows Karen had tried to cast. Luke showed up later, as he often did, carrying no fanfare, just his quiet presence. He crouched beside Sarah, helping her water the marigolds, with a small tin can. He didn't say it, but I knew this was why he'd done everything. Why he'd turned my dining room into a command center. Why he'd combed through boot prints and meter readings. Not for me. For her. For the child who deserved a street without shadows. The neighborhood itself was healing too. Joey's garden. Club had transformed the once sterile common grounds into a riot of vegetables and flowers. Neighbors who'd spent years avoiding each other now shared tomato seedlings and recipes. The laughter of children running between raised beds filled the air. It didn't look like Karen's vision of perfection anymore. It looked alive. Karen and her brother-in-law took their plea deals. No grand courtroom speeches, no dramatic collapse into handcuffs. Just signatures on paper, fines to pay, community service hours logged, criminal records etched forever. Justice isn't a movie. It's slower, quieter, paperwork that follows you for the rest of your life. And sometimes, that's enough. Karen sold her house not long after. The white SUV disappeared from the driveway, the oversized wreath removed from the door. In her place came a family with 2 kids and a golden retriever. Their laughter spilled out of open windows, basketball thumped against concrete, and one evening, the father waved from the driveway. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. One night, I stood at the end of my driveway, the street bathed in the amber glow of porch lights. Luke was beside me, quiet as always, watching Sarah chase fireflies across the yard. "You wait." "Did good," he said softly. I shook my head. "We did good." He gave the faintest nod, the closest thing to a smile. That was Luke, never loud, never seeking credit. But I knew, and he knew, that without him, the ledger would never have balanced. Because that's what this all came down to. Balance. For every lie, we had truth. For every shadow, light. For every bruise, a flower planted in its place. Sarah slipped her dirt-streaked hand into mine as we looked at the marigolds blooming in the yard. "It looks better now, Daddy," she whispered. "It does," I said, my voice thick. And it wasn't just the yard. It was the street, the neighbors, my daughter's smile, even me. We were better now, not untouched, not unscarred, but stronger. Learned my brother was a rock I could lean on. I learned my neighbors cared more than I'd dared to hope. I learned that I was stronger than the fear Karen tried to plant in me, and I learned something else, something I will pass on to Sarah. Always, don't lie, don't cry wolf, because lies have power. But truth has endurance. And in the end, it was the truth, steady and relentless, that saved us.